My name is Dylan. I'm from BNB Labs, and today we wanted to talk about mass adoption in Web3. A huge wave is coming, and we're discussing the next wave of adoption coming to Web3. We're going to be discussing the infrastructural improvements with our guests. We have Blast API, Chainstack, NodeReal, and remind me where storage,
QuickNode,
and QuickNode. So we have all the infrastructure here ready for you to listen to. Awesome. So there's going to be some new use cases that, of course, we're going to be able to talk about, but I want them to tell you how we're going to actually improve the performance of Web3 first before we start understanding how applications are going to run a lot faster and smoother and cheaper. Awesome. So I wanted to point the first question at the big question that we have about layer 2 applications and layer 1 applications is app chains or blockchain applications, right? So NodeReal, I wanted to ask you specifically because I know that you do this. Can you distinguish the difference and tell us what you favor over application chains or blockchain applications?
Yeah, definitely. So first of all, we don't really favor one or the other. So our heuristic with supporting certain chains is, where are the users, where are people developing on? And I would say as of now, most people are developing on EVM-compatible chains. But app chains do have a very good use case because gaming, for instance, requires a lot of throughput. So app chains allow you to control the trade-off matrix of centralization and performance. So you can create a blockchain that is controlled by 3 nodes or thousands. So that brings a lot of opportunities. Yeah.
Opportunities for games and speeding all the games up as well. Awesome, guys. And this is actually a general question for everybody. Do we all believe that every application should have its own blockchain and form its own modular network of application chains? What are your opinions?
I'll grab that one. Ryan here from Chainstack. So I'm going to start off by saying it depends. I think the whole idea of modular blockchains is fantastic. The ability of having, or the idea of having app-specific chains or dedicated chains is incredible. It comes down to a number of things, and it really comes down to what the goals of the app being built actually are. For example, if you're a game, you're going to want to take as much of the resources from a CPU perspective, a memory perspective, etc., and you really don't want to have the impact of anything else running on the chain. So having an app-specific chain for that definitely makes sense. Now, on the other hand, it is great to have a bunch of complementary services and or dApps that can run together on the same chain that may add value to each other. It could be for cross-communication purposes. It really actually doesn't impact the performance because quite often they're just lower performance applications. So I'll come back to my original statement. It depends on what's being built.
It totally depends. Anyone else have any? Cool. All right, that was great. So do you think that the way that blockchains scale today is similar to how traditional data centers scale in traditional Web 2 systems? I wanted to actually bring this over to QuickNode because we know the adoption of Google, we know the adoption of Microsoft, we know the adoption of all these things, and they set the entire thing on Storm. So what are we doing differently? What is the decentralized Internet of Things doing differently? How are we scaling differently? Can you take that?
Yeah, I think probably the most exciting part of how Web3 is scaling is that we can all participate, right? We can all take part in the upside of that scale. When you have the ability for new people to be able to spin up infrastructure, participate in the network, and participate in the upside of the rewards, right? That makes it something where we can all monetize our technical capabilities, our infrastructure, right? As opposed to it just being someone like AWS or someone like GCP that's taking that money home, right? And I think that's great, especially some of these chains that really make it something that we can all manage on our own infrastructure, and it doesn't have to maybe come into a server farm with these GPUs that maybe some of us can't afford or some of us can't keep up with. So I think that's quite exciting. I think that really is a huge part of the future, and that we can all participate in the upside and monetize its growth.
So data can be shared, but it also can be monetized as well because we're representing the same data. So there's more of an incentivization, correct?
Right, and as there is more traffic on the networks, right, and as there is more rewards to be earned, right, that's just transaction volume that we're able to all capture and monetize together as a community.
Awesome. Awesome. So now, I actually wanted to get like a bullet point from each one of you. There's various levels of decentralization, and it kind of goes across the board, across from UI, across from having a solid governance model, across from having better RPCs, against from better file storage, right? And the way that you're distributing these systems. So in your opinion, what is the major pain point for you or for the rest that you've seen that you think needs the most attention so that we can decentralize and have mass adoption? If you wanted to actually take this first.
Yeah, sure. Hi everyone, I'm Radu, I'm from Beaver Labs and Blast. The way we think about it at Beaver Labs is that it is a difficult problem to tackle, actually. In my opinion, the two most important parts would be having the UI part and making Web3 applications seamless to use by people outside of the Web3 in order to get mass adoption into Web3. And then the second part that I think is also important is the way we think about RPC. And what we're trying to solve at Blast is keeping the performance of blockchain APIs and in the same time decentralizing the infrastructure. So I think that is an important part because at some point you need the whole flow of data from a Web3 application to the blockchain to be decentralized, reliable, and performant. But the problem until now was that any enterprise solution, any application would always choose performance over the decentralization. So basically what we need to do is find a way to give that performance in a centralized way. That's what we try to solve at Blast, with Blast API at the moment.
So faster UI will, with responsive RPCs, creates a faster UI experience, and then we'll have this.
Yeah, something like that idea. I mean, we already have pretty high-performance APIs. I mean, everyone here allows for pretty good solutions. I mean, really good solutions. What we try to do is keep in line with the performance they have and do it decentralized. We've been doing a pretty good job until now. It's still a long way to go, but we think that would be the solution in the end, basically.
Awesome.
So I'll add to that. I'll say one of the most important components for onboarding the masses, especially as we look at the devs and the projects that are being built, is going to be simplicity and choice. If we make it too complex, if we limit the choices, and when I talk about choices, I'm talking about access to the types of RPC endpoints, dedicated or elastic type nodes, and a choice of blockchains. In particular, as we look at a lot of the dApps being developed today, a lot of projects are actually looking at the concept of multi-chain or multi-chain as such. And if we can provide a simple, easy solution for developers to be able to get access to the resources that they need across multiple chains, we make the onboarding and the adoption of these projects and platforms a lot easier.
Simpler UI and simpler interfaces that makes more sense for people. Yeah, I have like one of these questions with whether or not we do or don't pay gas for people, and we just have ERC 4337 or something, and I know that you have some pretty cool opinions, but what do you think, Julian, is the best thing that we need to do for decentralization, making it easier?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. So we look at the most recent plague that's affected our community, which is the FTX, and counterparty risk with holding your coin on centralized exchanges. But at the same time, normal users are not going to want to have to deal with the archaic process of generating seed phrases and doing all of that and managing their own keys. So ERC 4337 token standards is going to enable account abstraction, which I suggest everyone really look into. It's really a game-changing primitive that is now in the crypto space. So this is going to enable two-factor authentication, key backups, and a variety of other things that is really going to simplify the user experience of finding that equilibrium of being able to custody your own keys while still not dealing with the archaic process, as I mentioned, of dealing with all that key management and everything. So it's going to be huge.
I like that you mentioned like 2FA. I mean, I have like a general question about 2FA, if that can actually be generated in the cloud. Maybe I can actually start enabling 2FA. Maybe all my security permissions are done by me, but in a decentralized manner. I think if we have more security in a sense, then that would have more of this like trust formed between us and our users. If we have also more trust, it's like that different sense that we're not always thinking about.
Or also maybe granting authority to other, trusted people to then, being able to authenticate backups and everything. So
that's actually a really, really good point. So I've had a few talks here at Denver, and recently we've talked about this difference between trustless and trusted, but it always comes down to who you trust first. And this is a really interesting point that I was speaking with a couple of partners, and I don't know if you wanted to allude to what this trusted idea is on your end, and how do you establish more trust in a decentralized application? You can obviously do it through the UI, or whatever you want, but how do you establish trust between you and your user?
Yeah, I can talk about that from the perspective of storage, which is a decentralized, open participation cloud storage network, where basically user trust derives from the diversity or the statistical non-correlation of the endpoints that participate in the network. So you can start to create layers of trust for users by having non-correlation between the types of hardware that's run, the type of software, the operating system, the network connection, and most critically, the owner of the underlying infrastructure. Just like you wouldn't put all of your money into one stock or all of your eggs into one basket, you don't want to put all of your data with one storage provider. You want to distribute that risk across a diverse set of endpoints that are statistically non-correlated. Through that core level of trustlessness, we can create trust for users, and we can start to underwrite things like a service level agreement, an SLA, the durability, the availability, the performance of data. All of that can be derived through proper incentive construction across a distributed or decentralized or open network. And so what we see when it comes back to the user experience perspective is that it's critical to abstract the complexity. So while the complexity drives the key benefits of performance, security, it underpins the economic advantage versus centralized competitors like Amazon or Google. By abstracting that complexity, we're able to bring more developers into the network ecosystem. So from a usability perspective, we play with the S3 API. So if developers using AWS as their object storage layer, they just have to change their configuration file, change their API key, and they don't have to rewrite their file system or learn how to use new systems. I think abstraction is very key and critical when it comes to usability as a general theme.
Data abstraction.
Yeah. No, not necessarily account abstraction, but abstraction of the underlying mechanism of the storage service through a consumable SDK, API, and if you can make that compatible with the industry standard, the more the better.
Yeah, so how is it important to have a diversified portfolio of an SDK that can reach to the masses for greater adoption? Like, does it have to be in Java? Does it have to be in Go? Does it have to be in like an Android SDK? Like, what does it need to be in order for this?
Yeah, it needs to be compatible with the S3 API, but broadly, you need to meet the developers where they are. So you need to support a broad range of libraries, and that can be accomplished through binding your core functionality of your application, of your network, to a specific library like Java, like JavaScript, like Python. Bodo 3 is a key library that powers a lot of the AI workloads that we're compatible with. There are many others. And so by having more access points into a decentralized system, you can increase usage, scale performance, and make the experience better for everyone.
Yeah, I was thinking about iOS and mobile as well. It seems like I don't actually see enough of the iOS and mobile, and it's like this is the only thing I use. So. But what about yourself? Is it the rest of what we're kind of alluding to?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think of it more from a developer experience perspective, right? Because if we put the tools in the hands of the developers, of our customers at QuickNode to be able to make it as easy as possible for the end users, then that's the net positive for the industry, right? So, one of the biggest things that we see, even at the low cost of RPC services, is that people really struggle to be able to reduce their costs, especially in times like this, bear markets, etc. Right? So they're looking to be able to access data very easily, not have to go and index the whole blockchain, build up an index on their side. Just be able to say, hey, what NFTs does this address hold? Right? That is not something that's easy. That's hundreds of thousands of API calls to every single smart contract. It's just completely unreasonable. And that's things that we're starting to see as to how we can get this data to users more easily, and also be able to get them the data that they need without maybe them having to make the calls themselves. Let us know, hey, we want to be fed this information. We want a data feed, and us just pipe the information that they need at that time directly to them in real time.
Awesome. There's, it kind of reminds me of whether you're going to have a monolithic or a microservice architecture. So this is another open-ended question, but I have a really important question on where our applications are actually stored and how they're actually going to be serviced. Because I think that's the misconception is I have to know how it's going to actually get distributed before I actually start writing something. So the question is, and I want to lead it with Blast API because I know that you really focus on decentralization and speed. So most of our applications are running on a centralized service system, and we can already think of a name of a few. So what excites you about what you're seeing from BNB? You know that we have Greenfield coming up, which is a massive decentralized storage network, a mesh of decentralized storage networks, actually. So how do you believe that we're solving for the problem of centralized applications and moving into a more decentralized service-based approach, distribution approach?
Actually, the question is really good. The answer shouldn't be too complicated, right? Because we've been looking a lot about what is the path of data and requests throughout the whole blockchain infrastructure and infrastructure provider. So we think that a good solution or an improved solution for distributed or decentralized data storage was kind of missing so far. Of course, we had IPFS, but that was, from our experience and from our discussions with our customers, that was pretty difficult to use, still required you to run your own infrastructure. So if Greenfield, I'm currently not that familiar with the project, just read the available public information, but if Greenfield managed to give us a way in which to access this decentralized data, decentralized storage easier, then it might be the missing piece into the whole flow of information.
So making the access point more easily accessible. How does Blast API make the endpoint more easily accessible?
What we do at Blast API, we basically leverage the power of independent node providers that can come into the protocol, expose their nodes, and we basically take their nodes and expose it to customers. In the same time, we have an entire protocol that makes sure the nodes have the necessary performance required for any applications to run on blockchain. So basically, we are just trying to build on the many node providers that are out there and expose their data into for Web3 developers to use. And Greenfield comes one layer below that with exposing decentralized data storage easily for Web3 developers and eliminating the hurdles of running difficult infrastructure services.
And just so that if anyone's not aware of what Greenfield is, because you've mentioned it a few times, so Greenfield is a decentralized storage network, and it's made up of many, many different primary storage providers that have many different data storage secondary providers. And so we have a single endpoint, and we can have any infrastructure or any storage provider service clients directly with their data And then we have a data stored economy, and that it is sharing this data across all of the storage providers equally. So it's using the BNB token as a utility for this to happen. And so we have interesting correlations with what all of us can do together as far as how we're actually servicing a large cloud of data and how that's going to actually be serviced to the rest of the DeFi builders and the application builders, and how we're going to make data more accessible and also cheaper and faster. So I know we're almost out of time, but I wanted to point another question. NodeReal, Julian, we were discussing before about how you're supporting Greenfield, and what exactly is NodeReal doing to provide service to DeFi builders using NodeReal?
Yeah, definitely. So Greenfield is incredibly exciting, and I suggest everyone go out and read the white paper when you get a chance. But so NodeReal is a one-stop blockchain infrastructure provider. We do this one way through our core product, which is called MegaNode, which is a suite of APIs for RPC endpoints. But we also have an entirely separate services business where we're building out application-specific blockchains, ZK rollups, and optimistic rollups for a lot of Web 2 companies and enterprises, bringing them into the Web 3 space. So we're supporting Greenfield through, of course, our suite of APIs, and we'll be doing that. But I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity to use Greenfield as kind of this Lego block in our services business to implement it into these blockchain solutions for Web 2 companies. So a lot of opportunities with, enabling users to take ownership of their data and being able to monetize it. So that's kind of like this dream we have with Web 3, and I think Greenfield's really actually is going to enable this. And the possibilities are have yet to be seen. So new primitives are going to emerge from this, and yeah, it's incredibly exciting.
Well, we have now we have cloud and CRUD along with a smart contract. So you can interface with Greenfield through a smart contract and be able to change the data, delete the data, move the data, and it's still cloud. So I can finally do open AI if I wanted to, I'm assuming. So it's interesting of the things that we can do, but then all the infrastructure actually has to be there in order for all of this to work. So there is many different use cases that I'd like to see come out of Greenfield and what we can start doing with smart contractual cloud applications, and I think that's a very exciting new topic that I don't think anyone's really kind of discussing as far as the use case is concerned. What would you do? I mean, there's social-fi and then there's DeFi, but then I actually have an identity that's stored in the cloud, and then I can actually interface with this DeFi application on my DID. And then we can get into really exciting use cases on ZK, because ZK allows for you to be either anonymous or not. So I would say, what are some of the exciting cloud applications that we can start thinking of, whether it be games or whether it be web hosting, and how you think about social public good. And now I can start doing crowdsourcing with the open source, since my website can be on the cloud and everyone can use a smart contract. So Greenfield opens up a whole opportunity, what Amazon and cloud and all these things were allowing us to do. But now we actually have a decentralized way of doing it with a smart contract. So my question to you guys before we end this is, what excites you about the cloud and smart contracts, and what is something that you would like to see?
Yeah, I can kick that off. So I think the most interesting architecture right now across software broadly is the artificial intelligence generative AI workflow. And it's extremely well suited for decentralized cloud and for Web3. You have massive, large pre-trained data sets. For example, Lion 5B, which consists of 5 billion pictures, 250 terabytes of data that are basically, it's compressed into model weights like Stable Diffusion, like DALL-E 2 from OpenAI, that enable new kinds of creative applications that drive workflows across advertising, gaming, all different kinds of industries. And obviously those models, those machine learning models, they need to be accessed in a democratized public way. OpenAI has gotten a lot of flack for not actually being open. Well, with the blockchain, we can ensure that these models and the data that train them remain open and remain accessible through decentralized infrastructure layers. And we can create architectures that are not only more globally accessible and available in terms of numbers of nodes and points of presence, but are also way more economical for businesses that are creating applications around these tools. So today, right, we see that decentralized cloud can be a tenth the price on both storage and bandwidth as compared to Amazon. You see the same thing in the market for GPUs, for compute that's training large models and machine learning data sets. And that's going to, I think, in combination, create a new kind of workflow that is public, blockchain driven, more ethical, and more economical for businesses across the world.
Imagine that with a layer 2.
Yeah.
Sub-second finality and no cost.
And attribution, right? So then you can start to have hash-based attribution for the inference output of these models. It's going to create all new kinds of ways to monetize creators and help creators monetize, as well as drive more efficient AI-driven applications. And I think we're just at the start of the crest of the wave of what's going to happen in that world.
Brilliant. Well, I think I'm going to end it there. Thank you so much, guys, for talking about your ideas and being creative with us and explaining everything that you've explained. And I think there's a lot that we can learn from where we're going and the improvements that we have to make. And I think there's a lot to talk about and to think about. So thank you so much. And thank you, everyone, for attending. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.